You're listening to the Good Question Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Our goal is to make each of our guests exclaim, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Because when that happens, it means you, the listener, may be inspired to learn more beyond the interview and to ask great questions yourself that lead to new insights. In this podcast, we cover historical and current anthropology, comparative religion, and history. Welcome, and let's get started.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Good Question Podcast. My guest today is Justn Nault. We're going to talk about hydration on a cellular level. He's the founder and CEO of Clovis and Personal Evolution. So welcome, Justn. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, let's start out with a little bit of your background, how you got into nutrition and specifically hydration.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a certified nutritional therapist, and I got into this after my niece was born terminally disabled. So I was actually a professional musician for 15 years and, had a thriving career in Nashville. And I learned a bit about the paleo diet and in my late 20s, and I was big into health, wellness, fitness, those kinds of things, and just saw transformative results from switching to a single ingredient whole foods diet that was paleo at the time. And right around that time, my niece was born having over 300 seizures a day. She was put in the pediatric ICU, and within a couple of weeks, she was not able to eat or drink. So they put her on a feeding tube called a G tube, and they started giving her a ketogenic baby formula. So that was my first introduction to the ketogenic diet, was by a Vanderbilt neurologist in Nashville for a dying infant. So it was a very strange experience, but it introduced to me just the unbelievable power of food and its impact on human biology. And I was kind of off to the races from there. I started studying, biology, biochemistry, and human metabolism, and trying to figure out what makes these human bodies of ours tick and produce energy efficiently.
It's weird. I've heard from doctors that in medical school, maybe they'll get one day of nutrition or nothing. The only thing that keeps you alive, if you live, let's say 80, 90 years, is food, water, air. But yet they say, it has nothing to do with health.
Yeah, it's a bit, everything shifts. I know you obviously are doing like a podcast and have this show, but once I started going down the rabbit holes of marketing, I just realized that pharmaceutical companies and mainstream medicine are the biggest and most successful marketing funnel that has ever existed in the history of humans. And that's really all it is. It's a giant funnel for a for-profit system. And there's a reason why they don't learn about nutrition. There's a reason why the solution to everything is some kind of medication that then carries side effects that needs another medication. And it's just this kind of endless cycle that people find themselves in.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
So this is your niece that was having seizures and the ketogenic diet and everything. And what happened from there?
Yeah, well, this goes to what we just spoke about is I was a nutritional therapist at the time. I became a certified nutritional therapist for the sole purpose of just working with myself. Like, I was my own client. I wanted to learn about epigenetics and how this all worked and how food impacted epigenetics. And so when I found out what was in KetoCal, which was the baby formula, and this is subsidized by our tax dollars. It's made by Gerber, and Gerber's owned by Nestle. And this is how they give a ketogenic diet to babies. So I look at the ingredients, and of course, it's high fat, low carb. So it's technically keto. But all the fats are hydrogenated vegetable oils and artificial flavors and sweeteners, and all the vitamins are, it's like synthetic, versions of B vitamins, non-methylated, all these things. So I pointed that out to the Vanderbilt neurologist, and he looked me dead in the face and he says, I never thought to check that.
Of course not. You're just a doctor. Why would you check it?
Exactly, right? And I think he's probably a great guy. I think he was trying to help. He's just doing standard of care. That was what he had been taught to do. But it was very telling that the moment he did check the ingredients label, I could see it on his face. He recognized very quickly, this is not good. And I actually made a baby formula for Savannah. I went home and used food dehydrators, food processors in my oven, and I just kind of made a powdered formula of paleo superfoods, cleared it with the Vanderbilt neurologist to feed her through her G-tube. Savannah's life expectancy was less than 3 years at the time. She's now 10, but unfortunately she is what's considered 100% disabled. They have a nurse that's in their house 50 hours a week caring for her. But yeah, it's a pretty gnarly experience.
Oh, man. But what happened once you started feeding Savannah the formulation you made? What did you notice?
Well, the interesting thing with Savannah was she did not turn out to be epileptic. So the ketogenic diet in mainstream medicine is usually used with children that are dealing with epilepsy specifically. There's an entire foundation called the Charlie Foundation, and sounds like you're familiar with them. So with Savannah, there wasn't much of a change, and her brain development has really not changed since that time. The only marker that we have to go off of is her life expectancy was less than 3 years. She was almost assuredly going to die, and she's now 10. So, the outcome is certainly not an ideal outcome. And I don't know what role the whole foods played, but she certainly has done, by some measures, much better than she was supposed to.
Well, what about for yourself? You said you got this nutritional degree specifically first to help yourself. So what did you do and what happened to you?
Transformed my entire life. It was the single most profound thing I've ever done. And, it's interesting because
Well, let's gloss over it. I'm just kidding. Let's go into it. Yeah. It's only kind of important to you. So maybe we should go this bit.
Well, I mean, my story was really, I grew up in the 90s. I was born in 86. And the sort of politically incorrect term now that we wouldn't use is like, I was a fat kid. I was a very chunky kid growing up, and I grew up watching Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I just wanted to be an action hero. So, I hated my body from a young age. So for me, I did what I think a lot of men my age do. And by age 15, Muscle and Fitness magazine was my Bible. And I was just eating whatever I was told to eat by Muscle and Fitness magazine. I was lifting weights 2 hours a day and just punishing my body and trying to get it healthier. And then I became a professional musician. So in my 20s, I was on stage 300 nights a year. I was literally living under spotlights. I had a reality TV show on ABC by the time I was 25, and the body dysmorphia was just getting worse and worse. So I was endlessly punishing myself with these grueling workouts. I mean, I'm a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. I was a boxer. I was deadlifting 400 pounds. Like, I just was constantly punishing myself, and I couldn't get my body to look the way that I wanted it to. And that's why when I was around 26, I finally found the paleo diet. I did my first paleo reset, which is basically just switching to a single ingredient whole foods diet. And I dropped like 10% body fat. It was insane. I mean, probably not 10% in the first 30 days, but within the first 6 months of going paleo, I had dropped about 10% body fat.
It's a lot. It's great.
Yeah, it was astonishing, right? So now I'm looking back over all this hard work I had done and realizing that I was actually really damaging my body. I was actually going way over the threshold of what is beneficial exercise and really punishing myself. And once I found paleo, everything started to shift. And then once Savannah's situation happened, I decided to explore the ketogenic diet and start playing with metabolic flexibility. So I stayed in nutritional ketosis by blood draw for about 12 and a half weeks. And every day was doing 2 hours of fasted cardio to just get myself deeper and deeper into ketosis. And it was astonishing, man. I mean, things really transformed. Now, when I look back, I don't follow keto now, and I don't actually give people keto now long term. I do use ketogenic diets as sort of resets and helping the body just kind of process some things. The more toxic processed food you have in your diet, the better you're going to do with keto in the beginning in terms of like the changes that you experience. But ultimately what we're doing is we're changing the way your cells create energy. So everything that I'm doing and everything I did in myself and I now do with clients is making your mitochondria create ATP more efficiently and give you more energy. More energy equals better health. And that was the shift for me, right? As I was, whatever calories I was taking in, whatever macronutrients I was taking in, I was just constantly punishing myself with energy expenditure. And I still find today that all of mainstream medicine is like restrict food in and absolutely hammer calories out as much as you can. And that's the answer to health and wellness. And I actually think that's extremely harmful and detrimental. It was once I focused exclusively on the nourishment piece and actually to some degree limiting the amount of calories out I was forcing my body to do, everything changed. Libido improved. I literally feel like I aged backwards. My performance when I was working out improved. Mood, energy, cognitive focus, sleep, everything changed.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you weren't doing the punishing workouts at this time. You were instead focusing more on the nutrition side.
Yes. I shifted from about 6 days per week of high intensity workouts to 3 days per week of about 30 to 40 minutes of compound barbell weightlifting. And I mean, just completely transformed my physique, my power, everything. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I felt at certain times, I've worked out for a long time. If my diet is not on point, it literally feels like it blocks me from improving. It blocks me from lifting more and it's weird. It's like a very, very powerful effect.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about the fact that, exercise is incredibly inflammatory, right? So you're basically asking your body to repair from these intense workouts that are causing inflammation in the body. And then most people, bodybuilders, whatever, that don't understand the power of food are usually eating incredibly inflammatory foods. So yes, I know a lot of people that were physique competitors in their 20s and now they're 35 years old and they're 60 pounds overweight and they can't figure it out and they're trying to do what they were doing in their 20s. But the compounding damage on cells, they're literally limiting their body's ability to be able to regenerate itself. It's like compounding interest in a bank account, just in a very bad direction, if that makes sense.
Well, I know everyone's impatient, including myself. So if someone hasn't been eating well and they're like 30s, 40s, 50s, how long do they need to be patient with the right dieting in order to start to really see good effects? Like how long does it take to get inflammation down and their body is
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I always say that the feeling trumps the result. And what I mean by that is really the entirety of health and wellness is focused on one thing. Are you fat or are you thin? And the obesity epidemic has taken such center stage for the last 70 years that people, it's like if someone in their 50s is like a marathon runner and is super lean with a six pack and they get cancer and they pass away, everyone is absolutely stunned. And, oh my God, they were so healthy. That was such a healthy person. How did this happen? They weren't healthy. You don't get cancer if you're metabolically healthy, right? So we're looking at the wrong metrics. So the reason why I say the feeling trumps the result, I'm talking about the result of weight loss. How many pounds have come off on the scale? How are your clothes fitting, etc. Because it really does seem to be some kind of insane gift from the universe that if you take this seriously and you just get the toxic junk out of your diet and nourish yourself with nutrient-dense whole foods, inside of 30 days, you will feel dramatically different. Your clothes will very likely fit differently, but your cognitive function, your mood, how much you get into arguments with your romantic partner, what does your libido look like? What is your sleep like? What are your inflammation levels if we measure them via blood? I can get your inflammation levels down in 30 days for sure. Now, what ends up happening with the emotional and psychological side of this is you may have someone who's been obese for 30 years and they're just so desperate to get the weight off that if we improve all of their blood markers within 30 days, but they haven't dropped 20 pounds, they might jump ship and go try some other program that is like some drastic calorie cutting or something like that, because we can't get people to focus on the long term.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. So what does the protocol look like when someone comes to you? Well, first of all, what are some of the common stories of the people that come to you for help? What are they telling you is plaguing them or bugging them?
Yeah, I'm the guy that people tend to come to when absolutely nothing else has worked. So the most common thing I hear with new clients is I have tried everything. And then I have to very gently help them see that they haven't tried everything. They've tried the same thing with many different names. And the thing that they're trying is restriction. So I try to help people see that maintenance calories, this idea of maintenance calories, which includes, your total energy expenditure from fitness, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is called NEAT, just you bouncing your feet, blinking your eyes, whatever, the thermic effect of food, your basal metabolic rate, like all your calories for the day, everything. Maintenance calories is how you achieve optimal health and wellness. So few people, especially people that have been overweight for a long time, they're almost constantly at least trying to live in a calorie deficit. So I try to help everyone see, like, if you tried carnivore, you're restricting whole food groups. If you tried keto, you're restricting carbs. If you tried vegan, you're restricting meat. It's just constant restriction, 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 and never giving your body enough. You're always giving your body less than it needs. And I take a fundamentally opposite approach to that. If someone comes to me and they're obese, I'm going to focus on nourishment first. I'm going to hyperload things like super proteins, bone broth, organ meats, red meat, pasture-raised eggs, all these things that are incredibly nutrient dense. I'm going to hyperload those to increase the metabolic rate and give the body what it needs to start repairing itself. So that's what the protocol looks like. Is step one, we're getting all the hyperpalatable, ultra-processed junk out of your diet. And I'm doing that with what I call my thermometabolic foods list, which has over 110 foods to choose from. And it's dead simple. If it's on this list, you eat it. If it's not on this list, you don't eat it. If you can do that for me for 30, 60, 90 days, we will completely transform the way you feel. But then we take it even further based on a 22-question health assessment, and I will get into the nitty-gritty of, like, here are your macronutrients, here's what you want to eat each day. We go into meal planning and things like that. But I try to help people see that when I use macronutrients, it's not like any other dieting program in the world, because I'm using them as targets that I want you to hit. And then over time, over 90 days of my program, I'm going to get you to aim 20% higher than those macros that I started with on day one. I'm going to literally hyperload food until your body is able to heal itself. And then magically the weight starts to drop off. So these people have these astonishing experiences where they're like, I've never eaten this much food. I've never felt this full in my entire life, and I'm losing body fat.
Oh, that's cool. Hey, because usually the opposite happens. That's why they tie it to restriction. They're like, oh, got to restrict more because that plateaued. Got to keep going.
Exactly, right? And it's a race to the bottom. So what, you're eating 1,200 calories and you plateaued, so you're going to eat 1,000 calories now? Like, the idea of a 2,000 calorie a day diet, that's enough for an 8-year-old child, not a full-grown human. I mean, you're literally just like, you're slowly killing yourself, honestly.
So what does the protocol look like? You said you make sure they get all their macros, they get nutrient-dense foods, and you do blood work to see how it's they're uptaking it, or like, what do you do?
Yeah. So it depends on tiers, right? I have different tiers of coaching packages that I do. Now, my highest level coaching, when someone's working one-on-one with me, I have a full medical team that I partnered with. So you have access to a medical doctor. We do not only like standard serum blood work, but we also do cellular micronutrient assays. So we're separating the blood, the plasma, and the cells, and we're actually seeing what happens when, different antioxidants are introduced to the cells, or what's happening at a cellular level. Like, for example, I think nearly all women today, in the West at least, are estrogen dominant, and they'll get their blood test, and the serum blood will show an estradiol level that's totally normal or within reference range, when the amount of estrogen in the cell can be 20 to 30 times that amount, like a factor of 20 to 30x higher. So we have to make sure that we're testing the right things. And if someone comes to me and does private one-on-one coaching, we'll do this. We can tell them exactly what supplements that they need based on all that data. Now, if someone comes in and just does the online course by themselves, we're still testing this, because over 90 days, we have them with a spreadsheet that we provide for them, teaching them how to take their basal body temperature readings in the morning, after breakfast, and again in the afternoon. And we can actually measure how their thyroid is functioning and watch their metabolic rate via core body temperature go up over 90 days. And then we can correlate the rise in body temperature with the amount of fat or weight that they're losing. It's pretty cool to watch.
What happens to their core body temperature? How do they correlate with their health?
It goes up. So, I think a lot of people are dealing with at least low-level hypothyroidism, and it's because our entire society has this obsession with low-calorie diets and restriction and over-exercising, right? So, for instance, like, I may have someone come to me who's 200 pounds overweight, and day one, we measure their core body temperature, and it's like 94.6, which is like a walking corpse. Like, I want to see people at least 97.8 degrees Fahrenheit when they wake up first thing in the morning, closer to 98.2 if we can get them there. And then in the afternoon, we want to see 98.6, like what a human body should be. But almost nobody comes to me with those numbers today. I've had a few people come to me, like I work with some professional athletes, like UFC fighters and people like that. And some of those people come to me with incredibly high metabolic rates, but it's because they're eating like it's their job. Like they really focus on recovery. Most people that are overweight are dealing with a very, very low metabolic rate. And this is why the symptoms that we see, right? Like no one ever comes to me obese and they're dealing with like high energy issues. It's always like, I feel tired. I'm cold all the time. My hair's falling out. I have no libido. I have brain fog. I'm depressed, right? These are all low energy symptoms. So we have to get their body producing more energy, which is, and the way that we measure is your body creating more energy is where your body temperature is at.
Okay. So that's a proxy for more energy, is that you have a higher natural resting body temperature.
Yes, exactly.
Do you ever have people take it while they sleep to see how it changes throughout the night? If maybe it doesn't trough as low as other people's if they're producing more energy?
Yeah, it depends on if somebody has like a wearable device. So if I have a client that comes to me and like when we do the whole shebang, right, the kitchen sink where you have a medical team and everything, we have people through our links purchase an Oura Ring, and then we can actually track the Oura Ring data and see their body temperature changes over time. That's pretty cool too, because then you can actually see like things like illness coming. I remember when I first got COVID, I knew it was coming like 2 days early, and then sure enough, I'm like, oh, here we go. A sharp decline in my HRV and a pretty dramatic spike in my body temperature. So like to give an example, right? If someone's walking around at 94 degrees, we actually know this in the literature where for every 1 degree Fahrenheit that you raise your core body temperature, certain viruses, their replication rate drops by a factor of 200, like 200x less.
If your temperature goes up.
If your body temperature goes up. Yes, exactly. Which is why
I've heard of a protocol called hyperthermia for certain conditions that's supposed to like burn out those things.
Yeah. And we see this a lot in cancer data where you may have somebody who has like stage 4 cancer. They're in a hospital setting or hospice or something like that. Maybe they had surgery and they develop a really gnarly infection and they run a very high fever, like 105 degrees for 24 hours or whatever. There are miraculous cases of people having very high fever like that and then ending up cancer free. And it's sort of like looked at as this miracle, but it's really just the body healing itself. So the higher your body temperature is, the more you are able to fight off these different issues that the immune system is trying to handle. So there's a fine line, right? Like we don't want you running around at 105 degrees all the time, for sure. If you're operating in that normal 98.6 range, your body's far healthier, far more robust. And this is the other thing too, is like I've reversed lactose intolerance in people just tweaking this, right? We can supplement desiccated thyroid and give you a couple tablespoons of milk every day, increase your metabolic rate, and all of a sudden you're no longer lactose intolerant because your body's just not made of glass anymore.
What about people that have, hormone problems like low estrogen, high estrogen, or men with low testosterone, which seems to be becoming a lifelong condition for many?
Yeah. It's the same thing, right? Everything is driven by metabolism. So I always give the example of like upstream versus downstream is like, if you tackle things upstream, all the downstream things will handle themselves. So how much testosterone you have, how much estrogen you have, how much progesterone you have is all dictated by the health of your metabolism. So this is when I say my end goal is to increase the amount of ATP that your body creates and to make that creation process as efficient as possible. So if we get you to a state of optimal metabolic health, you will have an optimal hormonal environment in your body, guaranteed. So this is why you'll hear these kind of like myths or whatever. People will say, oh, I don't want to get on testosterone because I got to be on it for life. Or I don't want to get on thyroid medication because I need to be on it for life. And that's true. It's just that a doctor will come to you and say, oh, you have low T, let's put you on testosterone. And they don't have you change your lifestyle at all. So now your testosterone's elevated and now you have normal testosterone levels. 6 months later, you go off that testosterone. You're just going to go back to where you started because you're going back to the level of testosterone that your lifestyle supports. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're not changing the underlying supporting factors. So why wouldn't you go back to the previous state you were in?
Exactly. So when I look at things like HRT, right, or if I have somebody that comes in and we determine they have low T, we will put them on bioidentical testosterone because it makes them feel amazing. And now they're motivated. Now they want to go outside and walk, want to eat healthy food. They're feeling better, but we change all the lifestyle habits alongside of that. So eventually we taper off the testosterone and their testosterone stays in a normal range because they now have the lifestyle habits in place that support healthy testosterone.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the diet that you prescribe for people, is it that crazy or is it obvious?
No, it's not that great at all.
Yeah, like what are some of the common elements of it?
Yeah, the biggest thing I would say that is probably like the most shocking for some people is that the only grain on that entire list is organic white rice. So like basmati rice or sushi rice or jasmine rice. It's the only grain. There's no wheat, there's no oats, there's no barley, there's no corn, there's no nothing. So we're getting rid of the things that I believe cause the highest levels of inflammation with lectins and other plant toxins that mess with the permeability of the lining of the gut. So we're removing a lot of things that people are used to, like you're not going to eat bread on this program, and then we're hyperloading. What we're focusing on is what I call super proteins. Like I talked about earlier, you have like beef liver, pasture-raised eggs, shellfish are great for this, oysters are great for this, bone broth, getting the very, very heavy nutrient-dense super proteins that are easy for the body to absorb. So we're sort of hyperloading micronutrients there. And then you have pretty standard. We have root vegetables, potatoes and sweet potatoes. We have all types of vegetables, like you can eat your leafy greens and such. I don't recommend people eat raw leafy greens, so I have them cook their leafy greens if they're going to eat them. And then I love organic fruits, raw honey. I have pure cane sugar on the list. I think a lot of like villainization around things like sugar. There's actually no literature anywhere that shows that sugar by itself is harmful to humans. The problem is all the data is incredibly convoluted because all the science that we have that shows harm from sugar, the fat that was given to those subjects is polyunsaturated fat, so essentially seed oils.
Yeah, I've never seen a study where there was significant meat in the diet where it wasn't including high sugar as well. So you couldn't untangle the true effects of, let's say, carnivore or keto, because they always would lump in sugar and it's bad for you, see?
Yeah. 100%. Absolutely. It's the same way, like I wrote an article about this a couple of years ago because this story came out saying that eggs were as dangerous as smoking cigarettes. So I went and found the study that everybody was citing and it was behind a paywall. So I had to pay $40 for it or something like that. And it turns out study was a food frequency questionnaire. They're just asking people by memory to go back over the last 6 months and see how many eggs they ate, and foods that counted as egg consumption. Some of them were cake batter and donuts. You're like, yeah, this is really good science. This teaches us a lot.
That's crazy.
So yeah, the way I see it is my food list is incredibly abundant. I eat like a king every day. It's like last night for dinner, I had some organic white rice and a big New York strip steak, had a banana, it was great,
So you have to make shirts saying I'm 300 years old. They ask me how or something.
300 years old.
Well, if your diet's so good, it'd be funny if you had a shirt that said that or something, Joe 8.
Yeah. Ask me how old I am.
Ask me how old.
Yeah.
So I would think it's, in every area, there's people that you just can't help.
Oh, of course.
I know it's a hard question to answer, but when you've had people that you just can't help them, what do you think the reason is?
Yeah, I know exactly what it is. It's crazy. I know it seems like it's a hard question, but it's one of the easiest ever. And it's at the core of all of my programs. So for example, people are often very surprised when they come to me for weight loss that one of the first exercises I have them do is stand in a mirror, look themselves in the eyes and say, I love you 10 times out loud. And people like, what are you doing here? I thought I was here to lose weight. I'm like, you are. You're going to go up, down, all around on the weight loss roller coaster. You're going to start and stop diets. You're going to fail on fitness plans. You are going to fail at this until you love yourself enough to make better decisions for yourself. And what I'm up against more than anything is I don't just think we have an epidemic of obesity. I think we have an epidemic of people living lives that they're unhappy with. So I have to get people to a place where they realize, I'm like, listen, optimal health and wellness is going to be very challenging for you if you are in an emotionally abusive romantic relationship and you're spending 2 hours commuting to work one way, to work at a job that you hate where people don't respect you. And then when you're driving home, you're just going to stop at the Wendy's drive-thru and eat a Frosty because that Frosty is the best part of your day. That Frosty is the best part of your day. I have my work cut out for me because now I need to help you see you have chosen a life for yourself in which you are miserable. It's going to be very, very difficult for me to help you get healthy from that place because everything feels negative. It's like, oh, here's another nutritional therapist telling me that I can't eat my Frosty and I can't eat my favorite foods and blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, this is why we have people that come into Clovis. My company's called Clovis. And, 2 years later, they're down 100 pounds. They've left an emotionally abusive partner. They've started their own business. They moved from a state that they hate to a state that they love where the weather's better or whatever. I just try to help people see, like, if you're operating in that low energy state, it's much more likely that you're going to settle for things that are out of alignment with the person that you want to be.
True. If you're not willing to do some kind of commitment, right, make some kind of change, then what are we doing new?
Exactly. I always try to help people see, like, a weight loss journey is not a weight loss journey. It's a personal growth journey.
Yeah, I've tried to do some things that are uncomfortable, but, for my benefit. Like I've microgreens, so I'll have a handful of that every night, in the late evening. And it helps me like tremendously, you're very regular and all that. And again, I don't like how they taste, but it's not killing me to just eat a big handful of them with water and just eat them. It's a small discomfort, but it helps. So maybe there's things like that too with your programs that can help people. Just these small discomforts that they get used to, and then it's not so bad.
Yeah, and we start really slow. It's like that's aside from the daily mirror work, which is the self-love work. I have them make daily commitments to themselves, and I just tell people, meet yourself where you are. Right? Like maybe you're going to say, I commit to you that for the next 3 days, I'm going to start my morning with a glass of filtered water. Very easy thing to do. And then instead of setting yourself up for failure of like New Year's resolutions, right? All of a sudden, I'm going to eat 1,200 calories a day and I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week, even though I haven't worked out at all in the last year. Like that's a low self-worth, self-sabotage pattern. You're setting yourself up for failure,
Yeah, it makes sense.
If you can meet yourself where you are on these little daily habits, like I was, after a full meal, step outside, set a timer on your phone for 5 minutes and start walking. When the timer goes off, turn around and come home. Take a 10-minute walk,
Yeah, that's not bad at all. Yeah, you're right. So how can people get access to your programs? Like what levels do you have, and how do they speak to you to get help?
Yeah, so the thing, I would say just go to Instagram. All of my social media is the same. It's at Justn Nault Official. If you go to Justn Nault Official, give me a follow there on Instagram and just send me a message. Say, hey, I heard you on XYZ podcast and I want your foods list. Like I'll send you the foods list for free. I'll send you the daily mirror work exercise. Like any of the exercises I use with clients, I'm happy to send to people and they can just try them out for themselves and see how they feel. Or even the foods list, right? If the foods list is the only thing you get from me and you change nothing, you just follow that foods list for the next 12 months of your life, like a year from now, you will not recognize yourself. It will be astonishingly powerful. So I always just tell people to shoot me a message and let's have a conversation.
Okay. Well, very good. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and making it sound simple yet effective. So, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Good Question Podcast. Please email support@thegoodquestionpodcast.com if you have any referrals to great guests for us to interview. Visit thegoodquestionpodcast.com to hear more interviews. And please help us spread the word by rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to this podcast.